When it comes to finding one's bashert, there are actually two parts to the equation. Obviously, there's Hashem's part, but I mean in terms of our own hishtadlus, what we're supposed to do. There's what I call the paper test, and then there's the bashert test. And each are separate. Let's deal with the paper test. And what is the paper test? The paper test is before anyone meets anybody, before there's any emotional involvement, and before there's any sort of looking or seeing. You sit down and you ask yourself, on paper, does this make sense? On paper, does this seem to be a good match? Meaning to say, in big, broad brushstrokes, are these two people looking for the same sort of lifestyle? Are they looking to bring up children in the same way, to create a home in the same path? But you see, it's big, broad brushstrokes. It's not the specifics, and it's not the details. Well, I'm this kind of person, so I need that kind of person. I want this, I want that. And we're talking about very, very big picture issues. He's looking for a certain kind of lifestyle. She's looking for the same kind of lifestyle. They're holding in about the same place. And that's a situation where they pass the paper test. There are other questions which you're going to ask on the paper test. You want to make sure that what you see is what you get. And you want to make sure that the person you're meeting on the date is actually the person, and you're not being tricked, you're not being fooled. And we'll discuss in a moment what some of those questions are. But what we're dealing with here is very broad brushstrokes. And it's typically the opposite of what most people look for. Even ask Moshe Chanim, what type of people are you going to match up? Well, we're going to take people who are similar, people the same sort of personality style, same sort of likes and dislikes. If they're kind of like alike, then obviously there'll be a good shidduch, right? Well, I'd like to share with you that very little could be further from the truth. Because if you start looking around at couples, you'll find almost invariably they're not much alike at all. And typically it's the couple that you would least put together that are the best suited. What the paper test determines is, in a general sense, is this the person who seems to share the same sort of interest in life and seems to be in the same sort of place? Religiously, you have to be, again, in broad brushstrokes, you have to be holding the same place. In terms of lifestyle, you have to be holding it about the same place. But again, these are broad brushstrokes. But there's one more part to the paper test that's essential. It is essential that you do research about the person. Many, many times the person that you meet on the date isn't that person. And you should have someone, to be a parent or a mentor or someone who does the phone calls for you and does the research. And the research here is very, very important. What you're looking for is not what most people tend to look for. What you're looking for are things that you won't find on the date. And I'll explain to you what those two things are. Number one, mental stability. You want to make sure that this person is stable, is normal, is rational. You want to make sure that what you see on the date is in fact who this person is. And number two, you want to find out, is there anything in this person's history, any skeletons in their closet that might dramatically impact who they are as a father, a mother, who they are as a spouse. Because those two things you're not going to find out on the date. You see, many a young man, many a young woman shows up on the date smiley and happy, and it turns out that manic depressive is an understatement to describe their situation. And I'm not being critical over here, and it could be that such a person is the right match for you or someone else, but that's something that you need to know that you're actually dealing with. You see, when you're going out with this person, you want to know that the person that you're meeting is that person that you're going to marry. You want to make sure that you're not being tricked, you're not being fooled. And that's where the paper test comes in. The paper test is someone else other than yourself, sometimes a parent, sometimes a mentor, someone who calls around and gets information from people who aren't going to lie, aren't going to shade the truth, who will tell you who the person really is. And this is something that I find very, very rarely is done correctly. I get phone calls all the time from parents, from different involved people. Can you tell me about so-and-so? Whether it be a young man or young woman. And I want to share with you that it puts me in a very delicate situation. You see, let's say you call me up, and I don't know you from Adam. I don't know you at all. And I do know the young man that you're calling me about. Let's say he was in my high school shiur, or I know him personally. And let's even assume I know some things about him that are very, very not something that's so easily saleable and makes it less than the best shidduch in the world. If I don't know you, why would I say something to you? It would be irresponsible for me to mention anything, because how do I know who you are? And quite the opposite. Maybe it's the best shidduch in the world. Meaning to say, Hashem matches up all people. Hashem matches up people who are healthy and well, people who are not so well, people who are in all different states of life. What right would I have to ruin a shidduch if I don't know you? You call me about someone and you ask me about this person. And what right would I have to say anything, certainly negative about the person, when I don't know you and I don't think I might be ruining a good shidduch? Now, there are very, very carefully detailed halachas about Lashon Hara, and knowing what to say, when to say, etc., is a very, very delicate balance. But I was there many a time when great Rosh Hashivas would often pass the phone one to the other because they didn't want to speak about a certain bachar. And this is the first thing you have to know. When you're researching a young man or a young woman, you have to have people that you ask that know that person well and are going to tell you the truth. Meaning to say, they know you, they know where you're holding, and they can tell you whether this person is a good match or not. And this is a very big issue because, again, if you're going to have the best person in the world make phone calls for you, but they're going to call people who either don't know the person well or aren't going to get the truth, then again, it's not going to get you very far. So if you'd like to know the way of asking the questions, it's a lot less simple than it sounds. The first thing I think you need is someone that you can rely on to ask questions well. I used to ask the following question to people. The person who's making phone calls for you, the person who's researching for you, would you trust them to buy a used car for you? Do you trust their wisdom and their balance, their sobriety? Do you trust their judgment? Now, sometimes this is delicate because, again, if it's your parents who are really very involved in your shidduchim and you're not so confident, it's a very delicate balance and it's not always so simple. But the first thing is that the person doing research for you should be a person that's reliable, whose judgment you trust, who can really ferret out the right information and the wrong information. The next issue is when they're calling people, what are they looking for? So the first thing is that they're looking for someone who knows this individual well. That doesn't mean, oh, I met him once in a shir, he davens next to me in shul every once in a while. The best references are people who know him or her from high school, maybe from seminary, roommates, people who really know them in the ins and outs of the world. Oftentimes, Rebbeim are not the best references because as a Rebbe, your job is to love your Talmidim and to always look at them very well. I remember as a high school Rebbe, there was one fellow in my shir who I used to love. The guy was great. He was wonderful. And he did something once that was pretty colorful, and I went to the yeshiva to defend him, to keep him in the yeshiva, and almost every guy in the yeshiva, from the kollel down to the high school guys, said he's the worst guy in the world. Now, I'm not a fool, I'm not totally blind, but I didn't see it. He was in my shir every day, and he learned beautifully. He liked me, I liked him, we had a very good relationship. For the Rebbe, he put on a very good face, and he put on a good show, and he fooled me, because I only found it out from the stream of people, person after person after person, who said, stay away, this guy's horrible, get him out of yeshiva, he's the worst thing in the world. And what I quickly discovered is people put on different faces to different people. So the first thing you need is someone whose judgment you trust, again, your parents or a mentor or someone who can research well. The second thing is they have to find people who know this person well. Now, this is not the FBI, and it's not the CIA, and you're not going to find out every deep, dark secret. And very likely it'll be a situation where you can't find out. And at a certain point, you have to say to yourself, I've done as much as I can. I've done as much research as I possibly can. And you have to rely on Hashem. But if you'd like to know what your shtadlis is, number one, the person should be asking the question should be reliable, trustworthy, judgment-wise. Number two, they have to be asking someone who knows the person well. And again, best is someone who knows them on a personal level, roommates, dorm mates, sometimes classmates, sometimes a Rebbe or a Mora, depending on the situation, but they have to know them very well. And then, what are the questions that you're asking? What are you looking for? So again, if you'd ask me, the primary information that you're looking for is what you're not going to find out on the date. Number one, is this person stable? Are they emotionally balanced? Are they really put together? And that may sound like a no-brainer, but in our day and age, it's not so simple at all. And again, not to say that that's a criteria definitely to say no if someone is on medication or whatever it may be, but that's something that you should know ahead of time and know whether that's something that's matim, that's appropriate for you in your situation, whatever it may be. And the second thing you want to know about is, are there any skeletons in their closet, any addictions, any serious traumas, anything that went on that will affect them but you're not going to see? Now, again, I find it rather ironic because I get calls often about people, whether, again, it was young men who were in my high school shiur, or either women or people I know, and I find the questions run the gamut from the foolish to the absurd. Can you tell me about the person? What kind of clothing did they wear? What kind of tablecloths? What kind of house? Now, a lot of peripherals might be interesting and might be a good way to sort of develop a conversation. But I have been there on the receiving end of question after question about details that are completely irrelevant. And at a certain point, I'll say to someone, "Madam, aren't you curious about what kind of person he is? Wouldn't you like to know what kind of father he would make? What kind of husband? Wouldn't you?" "Oh, yeah, that also." But you see, if you want to do research, if anything, that's the kind of question, that's the kind of line you want to be following. I want to know this person. Is he a good person? Is he fundamentally stable, healthy, and well? Is he the kind of person who will make a good father, who will make a good husband? But you see, really what you're looking for is the kind of information that you won't find out on the date. And it's those questions that have to be asked well. Usually the best way to do it is to ask quite a number of questions about peripherals. Can you tell me about the person? Where do they daven? What kind of shul? What kind of family? Did they get along well? And if you get the person talking, then you could slip in sort of the main question. So tell me, do you know that what kind of, we all have issues that we need to work on. If you had to tell me what are the one or two things that he could use most work on, what would that be? Now, if you ask that type of question 10, 15 minutes into the conversation, you might well get an answer that's very, very eye-opening and very significant. But again, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for mental stability. You want to know in general sense, is this a good person, a wholesome person? Is what you see what you get when that person shows up on the date? Now again, oftentimes you're never going to be able to find out because either you don't know people who know that person well enough or you're not going to be able to dig in and get that sort of information. But that's your job. Your job is to find out as much as you can about the person, and you have to ask different people. Usually, again, best is to find people who are going to feel beholden to you. You see, if I know you very well, and you call me about someone, and I know some dark secret about that person's past, it's going to be very difficult for me not to say. Especially, I have an obligation. Mitzvah say doraisa, I have an obligation to take care of your needs as much as that person's needs. So therefore, obviously, I'm going to have to be open and honest, and I'm going to tell you. But again, usually it's only upon asking, and it's usually no one wants to ruin a shidduch. So even if I know you well, usually I would answer questions that you ask. And it's a good idea to ask questions. Again, the typical, you begin with sort of questions that are what I would call peripherals, but interesting sort of background questions about the family, where they daven, who type of people they are they close-knit or not. You're really not looking for those details as much as to begin the conversation, and then you try to dig in onto the key issues. Does a person have a fierce temper? Do they ever get really angry? Do you ever find things that just seem strange about the person in some way? And again, what you're looking for is a healthy, stable, emotionally put together person, and then you know you've done your job. This is the paper test. The paper test really has two parts to it. The first part is looking based on what I know. Are these two people aligned? Are they looking for the same thing in life? Are they looking to be, about the same place? Again, in broad brushstrokes. And then number two, you do some research into finding out who this person really is. Is what I see what I get? And once you've done both of these parts and they line up, meaning again, in broad brushstrokes, they're holding it about the same place, and you know that this person is stable, emotionally put together, you now know that they passed the paper test, and you're now ready for the second part, which is the Bashar test.